What, you gonna act like you didn't see what happened last week? Well, in case you actually didn't see what happened last week, we took the Miata back to the racetrack and it ran great. The turbo felt good, it was making so much power, but it was also making a lot of oil leaks and a lot of smoke. So much oil was leaking that I stopped driving it because I was worried it was gonna catch on fire. So what does that mean? Why is it leaking all this oil? Is the Miata dead or can we fix it? Today we're gonna revamp the entire PCV system on the Miata, and along the way we're gonna install a 6 set of catch cans. Talk about a PCV system, what a catch can is even, why you may or may not need one, and much more.
What's the much more?
I don't know. I'm Zach and this is Money Pit. It's still Wednesday, my dudes. I want to give a big thank you to Manscape for sponsoring today's video. We're going to get back to Zach Job and his very handsome face, which I am in no way jealous of in a minute. But right now, you and I, we need to have a serious talk, okay? And it doesn't concern your fuzzy carpet or my bald twins, which are very smooth in case you were wondering. Thank you very much, Manscaped. No, today we gotta talk about Manscaped's all-new Weed Whacker nose and ear hair trimmer. This thing is awesome. Let's be honest, guys, we all have that one pesky nose hair that tickles your upper lip or that long ear hair that sticks out and, sorry, I'm not gonna finish that sentence. Long ear hair can be kind of gross. And don't you hate it when you yank out that nose hair and it hurts so much that it makes you cry, and then your girlfriend sees you crying and thinks that you're crying because the love between Tasha and Zach is just so real, and then she starts to make you watch another show, but this time there's a guy. But all that can be avoided thanks to the Weed Whacker. The Weed Whacker has a 9,000 RPM motor with a 360-degree rotary dual blade system to safely whack your weeds in wet or dry conditions. That's right, it's even water resistant, and it's the only nose hair trimmer on the market with a cordless, rechargeable lithium-ion battery that lasts up to 90 minutes of use. Wonder if it works on toes. So what are you waiting for? Get 20% off plus free shipping when you go to manscaped.com/donut, or just click the link in the description down below. You will not regret it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some stuff to take care of. Real men can cry. Okay, so before we go tearing into things, we need to understand our problem a little bit better. So we know we've got a massive amount of oil leaks, but why? What happened? Did all of our seals and gaskets just decide to go bad at the same time? No, that's not what's happening. We're pressurizing our crankcase and pushing oil out of all the seals and gaskets. So the problem that we're having is that our crankcase is filling with pressure. What does that mean? First off, what even is our crankcase? Well, crankcase is all of the free space in your engine, basically, where your crankshaft lives. It's where all your oil lives and all the free space in your valve cover. And rule of thumb, you don't want it to be under pressure. In fact, ideally, in an ideal world, your crankcase would be under vacuum all the time. But inversely, when it's under pressure, it'll do bad things like push oil out of all of the places. So now we know that we don't want any pressure in our crankcase, but we know that we have pressure in our crankcase. So how the hell is it getting in there? Where's it coming from? How's this happening? So there's basically a few different ways that pressure can leak into the crankcase from other parts of your engine. One of those ways is if your valve stem seals are bad. That's especially true on a boosted application like this, where our intake manifold is seeing a lot of pressure. If your valve stem seals are worn, some of that pressure from your intake manifold can leak past the seals and get into your crankcase. No good. Now, one of the other things is if your head gasket is busted. Ah! Is there still a head gasket in here? Nope, that would be a problem too. Another way that pressure can get into your crankcase is past your head gasket. If you've got a leaky head gasket that's letting some of the pressure from your combustion chambers into the oiling system, that will eventually end up in your crankcase and pressurize it. Now, the most common way of all of the ways for pressure to get in your crankcase is what's called blow-by. And that is basically pressure leaking past your piston rings when your engine's running. You see, each cylinder is making a bunch of pressure and exploding, and that's how the car runs. We know this. Some of that pressure leaks past the rings. If your rings are really worn, a lot of blow-by will get past the rings. If your rings are brand freaking new, your whole engine's brand new, still a little bit of blow-by is gonna get past the rings. So now we know that we don't want pressure in the crankcase, but even on a brand new healthy engine, there's gonna be a little bit of blow-by, putting a little bit of pressure into the crankcase. So what do we do with the blow-by?
That's where the PCV system comes in. It stands for positive crankcase ventilation, and it does exactly what it says. It ventilates crankcase pressure. Perfect, that's exactly what we want. It uses some clever thinking to basically extract the pressure from the crankcase and feed it back to the engine to be burnt and spit out the tailpipe. It's pretty sweet. Now let's take a look at the Miata and talk about what the PCV system used to look like before I it up. All right, so there are basically two sides to the stock PCV system on the Miata, and on a lot of cars. So the first side goes from the intake manifold at this nipple, and it connects to the crankcase by way of the valve cover, and in line is our PCV valve. Now this nifty little bugger is pretty trick, and can you hear that? There's a little pintle inside which moves depending on what's going on with your engine. So since this is connected to your intake manifold, which is often under vacuum, like when you're at idle, the little pintle in here basically meters that vacuum so that it doesn't act like a huge vacuum leak and make the engine run poorly, but it meters that and uses a little bit of that vacuum to suck on the crankcase and pull pressure out of it. And then when you drive off and there's less vacuum in your intake manifold, that pintle opens up more to allow for more flow. So when there's no vacuum, that's where the other side of the PCV system comes into play, and that's the side that I ruined. We've got this nipple at the valve cover, and you can see that some idiot put a cap on it.
Who did that?
I don't know. So yeah, apparently I put a cap on this crankcase vent at some point when we were doing some makeshift intake stuff. The idea is that this is connected in front of the throttle body. So even when you're at wide open throttle and on a naturally aspirated car, your intake manifold is basically at ambient pressure, there's still a lot of sucking happening, a lot of negative pressure happening in the intake tube because you're pulling in as much air as you can. So, since we can connect this to our intake tube in front of the throttle body, this side of the PCV system is responsible for removing pressure when we're ripping it, which is what we were doing all day at the track. Now, on a turbo setup, basically the same deal, it just needs to attach to the front of the turbo, the inlet, where this is only ever gonna see air being sucked into the turbo. There's never gonna be any positive pressure here. So when we're at wide open throttle making maximum boost and our intake manifold is all pressurized, this pipe is gonna be at the lowest pressure it'll ever be because it's gonna be sucking in as much air as possible. So basically what we need to do today is get this side of the PCV system working again, which means we need to connect this vent to this tube. But we're also gonna add some catch cans. So what the heck are those and where do they come in? Let's talk about it. Well, you see, blow-by and the crankcase pressure that we're talking about, well, that's not just air. It's full of a bunch of junk, bunch of little oil mist, and stuff that we don't really want our engine eating. So that's where the catch can comes in. It goes in line in our PCV system, and in our case, we have two catch cans, so there will be a catch can on both sides of the PCV system, and they basically go in line and trap those contaminants. They're basically like a filter. Now, when does that really matter? Because the truth is, it's got a PCV system from the factory, no catch can, and everything seems to be fine. Well, honestly, on an older car like the Miata that has port fuel injection, you can get away without a catch can. Basically, what's happening in a port fuel injection car is that the fuel injectors are squirting fuel in the ports of your intake manifold. Now what that means is that every time fuel is squirted, a lot of things get cleaned. Your intake manifold gets cleaned by the fuel, your valves are washed by the fuel, and none of the junk that's in your blow-by really builds up. But on a newer car that has direct injection, where the fuel is injected directly into the cylinder, none of that fuel wash occurs. Your valves don't get cleaned, your intake manifold doesn't get cleaned, so all the contaminants in the blow-by that we're talking about here can build up on your valves, and they can build up a lot. I've seen some crazy buildup. So catch cans are super important on newer direct injected engines, especially if they're modified. Got yourself a slick tune on your direct injected car? You should definitely add a catch can. So the install should go pretty smoothly, but there is one hitch. Space is kind of at a premium in the old Miata's engine bay. Let's look at where it's supposed to go. They want it to go right over here by the turbo. Now, there's part of me that thinks I could maybe wedge them in there, but I don't want to. And the reason is that I don't want my catch can setup to be that close to my exhaust, turbo or not. The fact is the catch can catches a lot of contaminants that are flammable. And if you ever overfill a catch can or one leaks or any weird thing happens, a line bursts and it's next to your exhaust, well, that's a recipe for a fire. Ask my boy Dan Brockett. I don't think I've ever used this fluid. You're out, bud. Anybody thirsty? A little Camelback. Just hook 12 volts up to it. Power Camelback, baby. All right, so we got the windshield washer bottle out of the way, and this space is pretty nice, so we're gonna move in. We gotta get this thing mounted, so I'm gonna mark a couple spots to drill some holes, and then we'll add some threads with our riv nut gun. Great, we got 2 holes, now we just gotta put some threads in them. We've got riv nuts, or threaded inserts. These are super awesome. They basically allow you to add threads to any hole. Basically, you get these threaded inserts, and they kind of install like a rivet in that they crush into place. So we'll put this puppy on here, and then the holes that we drilled are just big enough for these to slip in. So I'll slip them in, and then I'm gonna put this thing down and crush it into place, and it'll forever be there. Nice little thread. So basically the idea is when I pull these handles together, it'll pull these threads down and bulge out here and sandwich itself in place against the front face here. So it's pretty simple. It's just a mechanical little, actually, you wanna just waste one?
Yeah.
That's what happens.
I totally missed it.
For real? Now, with just a little bit of luck, those threads will line up with our holes. Whoa! Okay, so now we can mount our catch cans in place and then start plumbing them up. I'm gonna put these fittings on to the cans, and then we put the cans in the bracket, and then we can actually plumb it up. But we gotta put these little adapters in. All right, so now that we got our fittings on, these cans are ready to go in the car. All right, so the catch cans are in place and they look pretty dope. So now all we have to do is plumb them, which means basically reroute the whole PCV system through the catch cans and then back to how it's supposed to be. So no big deal, should be pretty easy. Hopefully I have enough hose because the routing that I'm doing is a little different than Radium intended. So I might have to make a trip to the store for some hose, but I can handle that. So let's get going. Okay, so, I mean, I want it to be pretty, but I don't care that much. All right, so I was hoping to route this line along the rear of the engine. I thought that would look better, but it gets a little too close to the turbo. The routing was not very good. So we're going at the front of the engine, and it doesn't look that bad. Now, these fittings that they gave us are really nice. These are called push lock fittings. Okay, they were really nice. They're AN on one side and then they're push lock on the other. These are really nice. Basically it means they don't need hose clamps for a setup like this. They use the optimal angle of sealing, which I think is 37 degrees. So these just plug into the hose that they gave us. No hose clamps, super sick. Okay, so we got our first hose plumbed. Now we need to plumb a line from the outlet of this can to the inlet pipe of the turbo. So I'm gonna run the line, then we'll worry about getting a barb put into the turbo inlet pipe. So we've got our 3/8 barb installed in our turbo inlet pipe. Now, a little disclaimer, this is pretty ugly and this is not the ideal way to do this. This is just kind of temporary for me just to get things working. Ideally, this would be a welded on piece of aluminum that actually would extend into this tube here with like a slash cut, which promotes a Venturi effect, which actually create vacuum in the hose that leads to our crankcase, which would be great. These just seem a touch too small. All right, that's one side of our PCV system and catch can plumbed, installed, completely done. Now we just gotta do the same thing to the other side, which should be a little bit easier. It's shorter and I don't have to add a barb. Let's do it. And I think I might have enough hose left, just barely. You know me and my hose. Little lube helps the hose go on. I think that's how that old song goes. Teaspoon of lube helps the hose go on. Unlike the other catch can, this catch can is gonna see boost pressure. Whenever we're making boost, this catch can will be pressurized. So it's extra important that all these fittings are pressure tight, sealed up. You know what I'm talking about? All right, now I need to tighten a few things up, but that is one completed install. That was pretty easy, and honestly, looks pretty cool. There's some hoses running around, but they look like they're there for a reason. That's what I like. With all the stuff that we did to this car before turboing it, to get it ready for turboing it, this really is one of the things that I should have done. It's kind of an oversight. You need to have a fully functioning PCV system if you're gonna turbo a car. Keep that in mind. Catch cans notwithstanding, but they are a nice touch. So I'm super excited to have a working PCV system with some dope catch cans, and now the Miata should be ready to rip without pushing a bunch of oil out everywhere. Hopefully. Once an oil leak starts, does it ever really stop? Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you had a good time, maybe learned a thing or two about PCV systems, and hopefully you learn from my mistakes and don't do dumb stuff and then forget about it. So I'll see you next Wednesday, and in the meantime, don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Zach Job and follow Donut at Donut Media. Goodbye!
Shirt! They're finally here! It took forever to design these things, but the results are amazing! This is truly my favorite shirt that we have ever put out. That's what happens when you keep getting better at it! We got two different colorways. They're both black, but they got different colored inks on them. I'm talking yellow and white, or green and red, and both of them are fire! You better order both of them now, because they're not gonna last very long at all. I'm ordering 12 of them myself. We're printing them right now, so go get them while you still can. DonutMedia.com. Tell them James sent you. There's actually no way that you can do that, but maybe tell yourself under your breath when you hit the cart.